Space Mountain at Disneyland is one of the world's most famous roller coasters, and it's the best coaster at the California Resort. This ride can be found at several Disney parks across the globe, but the Californian one may have the most complex history because it has been completely rebuilt and given multiple overlays. But is this the best version of Space Mountain? Find out in this review. Disneyland's first roller coaster was the Matterhorn bobsleds in 1959. This innovative tubular steel coaster was immensely popular with guests. Walt Disney realized thrill rides could have a place at the park, so he pitched a space-themed roller coaster in 1964 that would eventually become known as Space Mountain, but at the time, it was not deemed feasible for Disneyland given the technological limitations and space constraints. Walt Disney World opened in 1971 with just one park in Magic Kingdom. While the park was popular from day one, the park was criticized for a lack of thrill rides, as it opened without any roller coasters. The park's Fantasyland was not large enough to fit a clone of the Matterhorn, but there was a large tract of land available in Tomorrowland. This, combined with advancements in technology, led to Disney revitalizing the Space Mountain concept. Magic Kingdom Space Mountain opened in 1975. This was a dual-tracked roller coaster near total darkness. This version had guests sitting single file like the Matterhorn bobsleds. It had tight turns and 4 sizable drops offering really nice airtime. The ride was a smashing success, and Disney looked for a way to bring this ride to the California park, but it needed to be heavily modified. The Florida version would not fit at Disneyland. That version was housed in a massive white dome with a 300-foot or 91-meter diameter and a 180-foot or 55-meter tall max height. Designers were able to shoehorn a dome into Disney's Tomorrowland, but it was far shorter. It had a 200-foot or 61-meter diameter and a 118-foot or 36-meter tall max peak. This caused the entire coaster to be reworked. Rather than having 2 tracks, Disneyland Space Mountain would have a single track. To ensure it had sufficient capacity, the rockets could hold twice as many riders. The track gauge was increased to accommodate 2 cross seating. Then the ride was also given an all-new layout with a greater emphasis on sharp turns. This version opened in 1977 and was equally as popular. This layout would be cloned twice. It was a more attractive option given the smaller footprint, reduced staffing, and cost. Space Mountain was an opening-day attraction at Tokyo Disneyland in 1983 and also Hong Kong Disneyland in 2005. There is one other Space Mountain, but this one is far different. This one opened at Disneyland Paris in 1995. Rather than being placed in Tomorrowland, this ride was in Discoveryland, which was a steampunk-themed area based around the works of Jules Verne. Instead of being a traditional sit-down coaster focusing on turns and drops, this one was a launched multi-looping coaster from Vekoma, and it was the first coaster ever to feature onboard audio. Seeing the popularity of the onboard audio, Disneyland revamped their Space Mountain in 1996 by adding onboard audio as well. The ride received a custom sci-fi soundtrack from Dick Dale. This score fit the ride well and was highly popular with guests. Then in 1997, the mountain itself was modified. The famous white structure was painted brown. This was part of the new Tomorrowland project that was poorly received by parkgoers. As a result, Space Mountain was repainted white once again in 2003. But shortly after this was completed, Space Mountain suddenly closed. Remember the onboard audio that was added? This caused a significant amount of weight to be put in each train. This put increased stress on the structure, causing it to wear out prematurely. It's likely the ride would have needed a full rebuild eventually. Both Tokyo Disneyland and Hong Kong Disneyland are closing their Space Mountains later this year for a complete rebuild. Disneyland just accelerated the clock on theirs by adding the heavier audio system. When Space Mountain reopened in 2005, it was more or less a new coaster. The only track that wasn't replaced were the slow sections like the station and lift hills. Everything else was completely redone by dynamic attractions. While the layout remained the same, the structure was enhanced. The foundation was 3 stories deeper, and the track was beefier to handle heavier loads. This rebuild also had the added benefit of making the ride smoother than ever. The ride also received all new trains. They still had the onboard audio, but the Dick Dale soundtrack was replaced by a score from revered composer Michael Giacchino. Fans are torn which score they prefer, but I personally prefer the Giacchino score. I think it feels more epic, and I like how the tempo increases at strategic points in the layout. The visuals on the inside were similar to how they always were, an extremely dark building with a starfield effect around you, but the ride has gotten some special overlays throughout the years. The first was Rockin' Space Mountain. This ran for parts of 2006 and 2007. This version featured some new projection effects and a higher energy soundtrack. Then there have been some Halloween overlays. Originally, the park tried Nightmare Nebula in 2007. The main selling point of this was a pitch black ride experience. This is sort of similar to Deep Space Mountain at Florida's version, but it was not well received here. Meanwhile, Hong Kong Disneyland had debuted the Ghost Galaxy overlay in 2007. This one was loved for the custom soundtrack and creepy projection effects. Therefore, Disneyland added this overlay to the Halloween season from 2009 to 2018. I'm not really sure why it ever stopped. Last but not least, there is Hyperspace Mountain. This had an extended run from 2015 to 2017, and also for much of 2019, but it now runs for 1 to 2 months in April and May in honor of Star Wars Day. This version features snippets of John Williams' famous Star Wars music, and some spaceship projections. Unlike the prior overlays, I have been able to experience this one. It is fun, but I prefer the regular version of the ride, mainly for the standard on-ride soundtrack. The Giacchino score is a masterpiece. Interestingly, Hong Kong's version has been running as Hyperspace Mountain permanently ever since mid-2016. But back to Disneyland's version. This ride is located in the back corner of the park's Tomorrowland, and the iconic white dome looks fantastic. It is hidden from many angles from within the park, but it's quite the sight when you get a clear shot of it. The entry experience has changed quite a bit over the years. For a long time, you entered the attraction via the speed ramp. This was an inclined moving walkway that brought you from the midway all the way up to the queue line. This was centered with the mountain, offering some picturesque views. Today, you enter to the left of the building and ride sign. This used to be the entrance for the Magic Eye Theater, which once held 3D shows like Captain EO and Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. You then walk along the dining area for Pizza Planet and officially enter the queue line. This starts with a long ramp taking you onto the roof of the currently abandoned Magic Eye Theater. You see a lot of empty space up here. The line used to fill much of this space, but now a majority of the standby line consists of a series of switchbacks in the former Starcade building. Once you reach the merge point, you have a series of hallways themed to look like a space station. You usually walk right on through this bit. Originally, there was a window off to the side looking into the ride. This was a neat touch for those in the queue line, but it was covered up during the 2005 refurbishment to make the on-ride experience even darker. This ultimately leads to the station. You wrap around the upper level before heading down some ramps to the load platform. It continues the aesthetic of the last part of the queue line. You then have a giant rocket hanging from the ceiling. And then you see the trains, which are themed to look like rockets, and they're being dispatched like clockwork every few seconds. Each train holds just 12 riders. Each train has 2 cars with 3 rows of 2. To ensure the ride has sufficient capacity, a train is dispatched every 20 seconds. Despite this ride having a theoretical hourly capacity exceeding 2,000 guests, Space Mountain still has one of the longest lines of the resort day after day. The biggest reason is the ride's popularity. The standby wait routinely hits 60 to 90 minutes. The other issue is at least 2/3 of the ride's capacity is allocated for Lightning Lane, the park's paid skip-the-line system. This causes the standby wait to crawl at points, especially if the ride had extended bouts of downtime earlier in the day that caused a backup of Lightning Lanes. So how can you ride this with a short wait? There are 4 ways to do so. First, head here early. If you head here within the first half hour, you shouldn't have to wait more than 15 minutes. Second, head here at the end of the night. As long as you're in line by the official park closing time, you will be allowed to ride. Since no more Lightning Lanes are taken after park close, The standby line will move 3 times faster than it does for most of the day. 3. Reserve a lightning lane. This skip the line pass is a major time saver. It allows you to bypass the line for Space Mountain once per day. You book a 1-hour time slot for Space Mountain, and you shouldn't have to wait more than 10 to 15 minutes when your time is ready. 4. Most notably, this ride has a single rider line, but not many people know about it. Unlike most rides that have their single rider queues adjacent to the main entrance, Space Mountains is over by the exit ramp. This is often a walk-on during the first and last hour of the day. I have used it several times to marathon this coaster. Midday, it can build up a bit, but I've never seen it longer than 15 to 20 minutes at worst. When this happens, cast members form a line in the hallway and they'll send 5 to 6 people down to the load platform at a time. If you're using the single rider line and see some empty seats, it's not because the cast members forgot about you. Usually it comes down to weight. After trains leave the station, they are weighed. If a train is too heavy, the computer system will not allow the train to head up the lift hill. This is because the train can overspeed, causing issues with the timing of the multiple mid-course brake runs. The train instead heads left into a maintenance bay. Riders are then separated into multiple trains. Cast members are trained to avoid this scenario by leaving a seat and/or row empty if there are a lot of larger adults in a train. The root cause of this issue is the ride's block zone setup. A lot of rides have mid-course brake runs for vehicle spacing, but most have enough room on the final brake run to hold every single train. Not Space Mountain. This ride runs roughly a dozen trains at once. They cannot all fit on the final brake run. This ride is designed for continuous operation. The layout is 3 lift hills and 7 or 8 mid-course brake runs. If this ride stacks, trains need to start stopping in the mid-course brake runs. When this happens, the ride shuts down. The lights then come on, and cast members interestingly need to manually push the trains out of each block zone. This is why the load platform is usually chaotic. Cast members are busting their tails to avoid this scenario, which is known as cascading. Disney has 3 mitigations in place to prevent cascading. 1. They have a special load platform for those that need more time. There's a switch track after the main load platform that connects off to this. 2. Cast members will send an empty train or 2 if they see a backup starting. This clears the final brake run for the approaching trains. 3. Cast members can unload guests in the back block break before the main station. By having guests depart earlier, the rocket can return to the load platform empty. This allows the next set of riders to board a bit faster. Despite the brisk pace the crew moves at, they are still happy to accommodate seating requests if you have any of them. I don't think the forces vary too much in this ride depending where you're sitting, but the very front row has a slightly better sense of speed. This is because you have the usual wind-in-your-face sensation from the train itself, plus gusts from a series of fans. When it's your turn to board, you quickly enter the rocket. All belongings must ride with you. Bags go by your feet. Then smaller items like phones can go in a pouch in front of you. There's a decent chance the rocket will move forward before you even have time to get your restraint down. Like several rides at the resort, the restraint check occurs just past the load platform. There, cast members will visually verify restraints are down, and they'll ask guests to push up on them to verify they're locked. Everyone is restrained by an individual U-shaped lap bar. These are simple and comfortable. Once checked, the beautiful musical score starts up. You then round a corner and ascend the first of 3 lift hills. This one is short, but the panels on the wall turn red to signify a power transfer, so it's theatric between the visuals and audio. At the top, you turn down a tunnel with these flashing blue and purple lights. They are super bright, and they're accompanied by a pulsing audio effect that sounds very sci-fi. You then have the second lift hill. This is the largest one by far, as it's fairly steep. It also takes place in a tunnel with some visual effects. This one starts off with some stars and rings around you, but you then hear this crashing sound effect, and transforms into this vortex tunnel. It's pretty disorienting if you look forwards because you're staring at a galaxy rotating in the opposite direction of the tunnel effects. This spits you out in the main show building. You have the vast darkness with all the stars around you. Your rocket then rounds a corner and ascends the third and final lift hill. This one is tiny. I've seen conflicting figures what this ride's max height actually is, but every source hovers around the 8-story mark. As you near the top, you get a countdown for liftoff. But rather than going into a fast launch or a large drop, you have a gradual downhill descent. But don't worry, you'll get a good sense of speed in short order. This ride only has a top speed of 32 miles per hour or 51 kilometers per hour, but it feels way faster than that. That is because of all the darkness, tight elements, well-timed musical score, and abundance of wind machines. The latter two elements are something missing from Tokyo's version, and as a result, that one felt noticeably slower than California's. Space Mountain starts off with a downward left turn, followed by a wider turn left. Don't get used to left turns, this ride does not have many of them. Then there's a straightaway followed by a wide turn right. This initial part is pretty tame, but it's just the appetizer. This ride gets far wilder as it goes. You then rise upwards, getting a pinch of airtime if you have a heavier rocket. Then you pass through the first of several mid-course brake runs. And don't worry, you don't slow down here one bit. They're only there to stop the train if there's a log jam up ahead. The other nice thing about the brake runs is that most sharply level off at the exit. This ever so slightly pops you upwards. If I call a brake run kinked in this review, expect to see the same behavior. Next is a downward spiral that builds up solid speed. Then there's the final left turn for quite a while. This leads into another kinked mid-course brake run. Then there's a small right turn and an even wider right turn. They're not forceful, but the speed is building. Then comes another brake run. This one's not as sharp as the others though. The train then navigates 3 consecutive right-hand turns, hugging the edge of the building. You then have a climb upwards followed by another kinked mid-course brake run. This brings you to the halfway point of the ride. From this point, the ride goes berserk. It starts off with a sharp right-hand turn, offering nice laterals. This leads into the one and only real drop in the ride. It is maybe 2 to 3 stories tall maximum, but it offers a smidge of floater airtime in the rear car. And it sneaks up on you after the seemingly never-ending series of turns. I also like how the music intensifies during this moment as well. The sense of speed from this point forward is phenomenal as well. This is followed by a tight turn right, giving some more laterals. The train then whizzes through another kinked mid-course brake run. Next are 2 consecutive right-hand turns holding the speed well. Next is the final kinked mid-course brake run. This is followed by a very sharp right-hand turn. This one has decent G's and great laterals. You will be thrown sideways. You then cruise through another mid-course brake run. This one's just pretty flat throughout though. This is followed by another right-hand turn, also offering solid G's and strong laterals. The compactness of these turns are really felt. At this point, Space Mountain has had nearly a dozen straight right-hand turns. So what comes next when you least expect it? A super sharp left-hand turn. This offers good and surprising laterals. This is also paired with the climax of the musical score. You then have the re-entry tunnel at the end. This holds the brake run. There are these LED light panels around you, and then you have 2 blinding white flashes for the on-ride photo. You will be seeing stars after this. You then return to the load platform and disembark, ending the 3,459-foot or 1,054 meter long coaster. And every inch of track is smooth thanks to the refurbishment. So, what would I rate Space Mountain? I would give Disneyland's version of this coaster an 8 out of 10. This is a classic for good reason. The atmosphere is top-notch between the space effects, dark star field, and onboard audio. These factors make the layout exciting. The first half does start off a bit tame, but the second half is excellent. You have that sneaky drop and a series of punchy turns. The rating may skew towards an 8.5 out of 10 if you have a heavier rocket with some added speed, but at minimum, the ride is an 8 out of 10. But how does it compare to the other Space Mountains? Magic Kingdoms is still my favorite. While that one is jankier, I prefer the layout and how it incorporates the airtime-laden drops. It is a coin flip whether I prefer this one or Paris's. The latter is far more intense, but California's beats it in the pacing department. I would take Disneyland's version over Tokyo's because the latter is missing the audio and wind machines. These really help the pacing as I've covered throughout this review. I cannot comment on the Hong Kong version though, as I've not been to that park. If you've been there, let me know if it's closer to the California or Tokyo version. So those are my thoughts on Space Mountain at Disneyland. What are your thoughts on this coaster? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I would appreciate if you gave this video a like, and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.